Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go into such and such a town and spend a year there and trade and make a profit. Yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. As it is, you will boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. So whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him it is a sin. Come now, you rich. Weep and howl for the miseries that are coming upon you. Your riches have rotted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver have corroded, and their corrosion will be evidence against you and will eat your flesh like fire. You have laid up treasure in the last days. Behold, the wages of the laborers who mowed your fields, which you kept back by fraud, are crying out against you. And the cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord of hosts. You have lived on earth in luxury and in self-indulgence. You have fattened your hearts in a day of slaughter. You have condemned and murdered the righteous person. He does not resist you. This is the word of the Lord.
Well, hey, I am so excited to be able to stand up here with you and open God's word with you today. If you didn't know this, a little fun fact about me, I am a planner. I am type A through and through, and sometimes I joke that my spreadsheets have spreadsheets, and I'm only partly kidding when I say that. I function best on structure and routine. And I like to know what's going on, and I like to have all of my ducks in a row. And if you need any more evidence of this, then just look no further than my calendar. I keep my family's calendar. It's color coded. My work is blue. Liberty's is pink. Anything for the boys is purple. Church stuff is green. Family stuff is brown. So I have a system, and it works for me and my family well. I like to have a plan. It's never been said of me that I can roll well with punches or go with the flow, but I will say twins has completely changed that in me. Trial by fire, I have had to roll with punches and go with the flow with my boys. Whenever I take an honest look at myself and think through what drives me to be this way, I notice that whenever left unchecked, my tendency to be rigid and to fixate on having a plan and being organized, what it boils down to is that it boils down to the fact that I have a desire to be the one who's in control of my life. I have a desire to be the one who's in control of the situations that I face. I have a desire to be in control of my life. And while this probably is expressed different from person to person, I think that every single one of us in this room has this desire in common. One way or another, we all desire to be the ones who are in control of our lives. We desire to be the one who's in the driver's seat, the one who's calling the shots, the one who's charting the course of our life, and even the lives of those closest to us, those around us. But friends, the reality is that we are not in control of our lives, and we're truly incapable of controlling this. And honestly, this is a very good thing, because if I were the one who was in control of my life, boy, oh boy, what a mess that would be for me, for my life, and for those around me. Friends, thanks be to God that He, the all-powerful, the all-knowing, the holy, just, never-changing, the kind, the good, creator and sustainer of all, praise be to God that He is the one who is in control of all things. Friends, God is in control, not you, not me. God is in direct control over everyone and everything. And God is in control, and for those who surrender to Him and His lordship, we can trust and know and rest in Paul's promise that he writes in Romans chapter 8, verse 28, when he says, "And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to His purpose." Now, this promise, it does not mean that everything for the follower of Jesus will be cupcakes and lollipops and roses in this life. No, that's not what this is saying. This is not saying that everything will work out just how you want it to, that you will never get sick, that you will never feel hurt, that you will never feel the pain of loss, that you will never suffer. No, you see, this hope that comes from God for those who surrender to Him, the hope that comes to those who are following Jesus, is not ultimately a hope for this life, for these few days that we're on this earth, but it is a hope for eternity. Follower of Jesus, your hope is not in anything of this world. Your hope is found in Jesus Christ and Him alone, and the reality of being restored to relationship with your Creator, with your Savior. And when your mind is set on this, when your gaze is fully fixed on Jesus and on Him and on the reality of being united with Him for all of eternity, when your gaze is fixed on this, This will fuel you to endure the pain, the hardships, the heartache, the tears, the suffering that will come from living in this fallen and broken world. And not only will this truth fuel you to endure the here and now, but it will also completely and radically change how you live your short days here on this earth. It will change how you make your plans and use your resources, as we see James write in James chapter 4 and 5. And that brings us right to our take-home truth this morning. Our take-home truth is this: followers of Jesus will live their days with eternity in mind. Followers of Jesus will live their days on earth with eternity in mind. Let's pray, and then we're going to jump right in. God, we thank you and praise you for who you are. And we thank you for the hope that is had in Jesus and Jesus alone, a hope that's not merely for our short days on this earth, but that is a hope for eternity. And we thank you for Jesus, for his life, death, burial, and resurrection, and the hope that he provides through that. God, I pray that as we spend time in your word today, I pray that you would open our eyes to see you and you alone, high and lifted up. God, fix our eyes on you and you alone. Limit distractions. God, allow us to fix our eyes on Jesus. God, hide me behind the cross of Jesus and let him be the only thing that's made much of here today. God, we love you, we thank you, we praise you, and we ask all of this in your name. Amen. Amen. Well, hey, we're coming to the close of James's letter, and up to this point, he has spent a significant amount of time explaining to his audience that their faith in Jesus will lead them to a very real, a very evident, a clearly seen change in their life. James has gone to great lengths to explain that it is impossible to have genuine saving faith in Jesus and walk away the same. It is impossible to have a genuine saving faith in Jesus and not have a changed life that comes with that. So over the past several sermons in this letter, we've seen James discuss some of the specific areas that this change will be evident, that the change will be seen because of their faith in Jesus. And James, in this section that we're looking at, he's going to continue on this idea, unpacking how one's faith in Jesus will lead them to surrender, number one, to God's control of their plans and their future, and then number two, more specifically, how one uses and views their finances, their material treasures of this world. So let's jump in. So as he has done before in the letter, James begins this section by introducing an imaginary group of people's incorrect view on life, and he does this so that he can provide some correction and a call to repentance, a call to change. Now, even though this is an imaginary group of people that James is introducing, there would be many in his audience who would have directly identified with them in this way of thinking. And I would imagine that many of us in this room today do so as well. So look at James chapter 4, verse 13 with me. It says, "Come now, you who say, 'Today or tomorrow we will go into such and such a town and spend a year there and trade and make a profit.'" So James introduces this imaginary group of people who were merchants. They were people who sold goods in order to make a living. And this would have been a very common occupation among the people of James's day. And James, he describes this group of merchants as essentially planning a business trip. They make plans for a specific time to go to such and such a place, such and such a town, and spend some time there, and then they will trade and then make a profit. But notice in their plans the certainty that they make these plans. They say, "Today or tomorrow, we will go into such and such a town and spend a year there and trade and make a profit." In their minds, their plans were sure. There was no question about it. They claimed that they were, without a doubt, going to go to these towns. They were, without a doubt, going to spend a specified amount of time there. They were, without a doubt, going to trade, and most shockingly, according to their plans, they were, without a doubt, going to make a profit. I work at a bank here in town, and I work directly with our commercial customers, and most of the time that I'm talking with our customers, the business customers have confidence about their plans. They come in and they're like, "Hey, here's what we're going to do, and we're going to make a profit." And most of the time, obviously, they're convinced and they're confident in their plans, right? As they should be. But there's also this understanding of, well, things might not always go the way that you expect, right? In their projections, there's this understanding of, well, what happens if another COVID happens? There is this expectation that things don't always go according to plan. But the group in James's letter here, there's no indication of that line of thinking. They have a plan, and they are sure that this plan will come to pass. And look at what James has to say about this in verses 14 and 15. It says, today or tomorrow we will go into such and such a town and spend a year there and trade and make a profit. And then here's James's response. Yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. Now, James, he doesn't here rebuke them for making a profit or even having a desire to make a profit or planning or being diligent toward that end. No, he rebukes them for thinking that their life, their future, their plans, their success, that it rests in their own hands. The logic, the plan in verse 13 to go into such and such a town and spend a year there and trade and make a profit, on the surface, this seems like a good plan. It seems like James's response might seem a little bit of an overreaction. On the surface, it seems like the merchants here have thought through their situation well. They have a good business plan. They have a good strategy. They have a good plan for implementation. And by all worldly standards, things seem to be that they're set up for success. But when you look at this a little closer, do you notice anything, namely anyone who is missing in their plans? These people, that's right, the Lord, these people, they've made their plans that seem good by worldly standards, and yet they are, one, living their life in a way that ignores the brevity, the shortness of life on earth, and two, they have completely ignored God and are living their life in a godless, almost in an atheistic way. And friends, we in the 21st century in America, and even Christians in the church today, are prone to do this very same thing. Friends, do you regularly consider how short your life is on this earth? Or have you even considered this at all? James writes in verse 14, what is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes. James here, he rebukes the living of one's life, making plans, conducting business in a way that does not take into consideration the shortness, the brevity of life. He rebukes them for the living of life as if our days on this earth are short and that this life is all that there is. The reality is that one day each one of us will one day physically die. Our days on this earth are not a given. No, we all deserve physical death because each and every one of us have sinned. Each and every one of us have disobeyed, have rebelled against our Creator. God, He is the creator of everyone and everything, and He gets to set the rules for how His creation is to operate. And friends, this includes you and this includes me. And the reality is that you and I have miserably failed to live up to this perfect standard, to live up to His rules. God's standard is perfect, and anything less than perfect completely misses the mark. And that's what you and I do. You and I have completely missed the mark. And as Paul writes in Romans, we have fallen short of the glory of God. Friends, by our sin, by our rebellion, by our disobedience to God, we have miserably fallen short of God's perfect standard of perfection. And the punishment for this, the wage that we've earned by our disobedience, by our falling short, the wage of that, what we've rightly earned, is death. Both physical death, yes, but also spiritual death. Separation from God for all of eternity and the complete presence of His wrath in a very real place called hell. Friends, the reality is this is what you and I deserve. This is what we have earned. And left on our own, apart from God's intervention, this is what will come. Oh, but friends, thanks be to God that He has intervened in Jesus, God Himself, humbling Himself to come down to this earth, to live a life that you and I could never live, a life in complete perfection, a life in complete obedience to God, and His living up perfectly to His standard, a perfect, sinless life. Jesus lived that life that you and I are completely incapable of living. And yet we see that He died a death that you and I deserve to die. Jesus, He took on the wrath of God that you and I have rightly earned. He took that upon Himself on a cross. He was killed and He was buried. And 3 days later, He rose in victory over sin and death and hell. And through His life, His death, His burial, and resurrection, He makes a way for people like you and me, for people who have miserably fallen short of God's standard of perfection, who deserve the wrath of God. He makes a way for us to be made right with God, to have life with Him both now and forever, not through anything that you and I can do, but only through what Jesus has already done on the cross. Oh, friends, God has intervened through Jesus. And it is such a beautiful thing. It's such a beautiful gift. And while our days on this earth are short-lived, their length unknown, what happens after death is no secret. For the one who dies and who surrenders to Jesus and his lordship, there is everlasting life, restored relationship with God. But for the one who dies still in their rebellion, never surrendering to Jesus, never trusting in him and his finished work on the cross, the brutal reality is that these short days on earth that are full of toil and suffering and strife, these short days will be as good as it gets. For the one who dies in this life apart from Christ, eternity will only bring eternal death, eternal torment, eternity only in the presence of God's wrath. So, friend, if you are here today, if you're here and you have uncertainty about eternity, or if you've never even considered these things, won't you run to Jesus? Friend, you can have absolute certainty about eternity through Jesus and what he has done. So I beg you, if you have not, won't you run to him and find life eternal, both now and forever? God's promise is true, and anyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. So if you have not, I would beg you to run to Jesus, to surrender to him and rest in him. Trust in his finished work on the cross and out of the tomb to pave the way for you to have hope, not merely for these short days on earth, but hope for eternity. Like a mist, a vapor, our days on this earth are short-lived. We are here one moment and gone the next. We're not promised, guaranteed another decade, another year, another month, another day, another hour, another minute, even another second. Psalms 102, verses 15 and 16 says, "As for man, his days are like grass. He flourishes like a flower in the field. For the wind passes over it, and it is gone, and its place knows it no more. Who of us knows what tomorrow will bring," as James says in verse 14. "What is your life? For we are a mist that appears for a while, and then and for a little time, and then it vanishes." Our days are short. Our days are like a mist. And knowing that this is true, James, he then pulls the springs together and rebukes his audience's planning without taking this into consideration. He rebukes them for planning without considering the shortness of our days on earth in light of eternity. Now, James is not necessarily rebuking the act of planning in and of itself. No, rather, he is rebuking planning without perspective. James is rebuking planning without perspective. To God, the creator and sustainer of all, as Moses writes in Psalm 90, 1,000 years are but as yesterday when it's past, or as a watch in the night. But our life, our days on this earth are 70 or maybe even 80 years. Our time on this earth is short-lived, and the length of our time on this earth is out of our control. So then this begs the question, well, what do we do about this? Like, knowing that our days are like a vapor, that we are here one moment and gone the next, knowing that our days are short, follower of Jesus, how should our lives look different in light of this? How should this reality change the way that we go about the making of our plans? How should this change our life? Well, friends, thankfully, God does not leave us on our own to figure this out. No, Moses in Psalm 90, he continues, and in response to considering the shortness of life, he pleads with the Lord to teach us to number our days that we might get a heart of wisdom. Brothers, sisters, in light of this reality that our days are short, we ought to be on our faces asking God to teach us to live every moment, every second of our short years on this earth with eternity in mind. Asking him to empower us, to strengthen us, to plan our short-term schedules, our long-term schedules, our goals, our hopes, our dreams, every aspect of our life, knowing that our days are short, considering the vastness, the never-endingness of eternity, knowing that our days on this earth are just a mist for a little while, that's here for a little while, but then vanishes. Teach us, O Lord, to number our days, that we might gain a heart of wisdom. But notice in this how the people in James's illustration, they don't only make their plans without considering the shortness of life, but they also make their plans and leave no room for God to come and to change their plans. They fail to recognize that God is the one who's sovereign over the lives, which this word sovereign just means that God has the power, the wisdom, the authority to do anything that he chooses within his creation. So friends, God is sovereign over life, and he is sovereign over your life and over my life. God has the power, the wisdom, the authority to do anything that he chooses within you, within God's creation. Remember the certainty with which they said that they were going to make these plans. The certainty that they said that these plans will happen. They said, we will go into such and such a town and spend time there and trade and make a profit. These people here, they seem to make their plans and hold them tightly. They're holding on to plans with a white-knuckled, closed fist, refusing to let go of them. And friends, how often are we in this same boat? How easy is it for us to make our plans? And I'm not just talking about plans like what you're going to have for dinner tonight or what you're going to do for lunch after church. No, but even your 3, your 5, your 10-year plans, your goals, your hopes, your wants, your desires, your dreams. How often do we hold these in our hand with a closed fist, refusing to let go? Or refusing even to let God to come in and to change these plans. Friends, when we live our life in this way, this communicates that we are trying to be the ones who are in control of our lives. And the Bible is absolutely clear that this is the furthest thing from the truth. In light of this, look at James's exhortation and his correction to this way of thinking in verse 15. So in light of this, James then exhorts his audience to say in verse 15, instead you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. So instead of making our plans in a way that ignores God, that ignores the shortness of life, James encourages his audience to surrender to God's sovereignty, to his lordship, to in every aspect of our life, our planning, our goals, our dreams, aspirations, whatever, to surrender all of these to the fact that we are not the ones who are ultimately in control, but that God and God alone is sovereign over all of his creation. James's exhortation here, it's not a formula that's to be thoughtlessly or mindlessly prayed or thought before embarking on any plan. No, this is an encouragement to let the fact that God is the one who's in control completely and radically change or alter our outlook, every aspect of our way of life. To no longer hold our plans with a closed white-knuckle fist, but rather to hold our plans with an open palm. That's no longer making plans in a way that never considers God, but rather makes plans that surrenders to him, recognizing that he's the one who's ultimately in control. And as James says in verse 16, an attitude that is opposite of this, an attitude that boasts in our making of plans, never considering the Lord's sovereignty or the brevity of life, making plans in this way or living our life in this way is arrogant and it is evil. Follower of Jesus, choosing to cling to your desire for control, your planning without eternal perspective, and in a way that does not surrender to the Lord's sovereignty. Hear James when he say this, it is boastful and it is evil. But you can surrender your desire for control to the Lord and trust in his provision with confidence, knowing the one who is in control. And that's not you, it is God, and he is good, and he is working for your good and his glory in all situations, even if it doesn't make sense according to the world's wisdom. Anything other than surrender to the Lord and his sovereign control, as James notes in verse 17, is sin. Verse 17 of chapter 4 says, so whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him it is sin. Sin is not only taking action, whether that be by thought or word or deed, to disobey God, but it is also the lack of doing what God commands us to do. These two different angles of looking at sin are called sins of commission and sins of omission. Sins of commission are sins that we take actions to commit, whether that be in thought or word or deed, and these can be intentional or even unintentional. But sins of omission are those in which we know that we should have done something good, but refused to do it. Follower of Jesus, your faith in him will change your life. How you go about your life, making your plans for the future, your faith in Jesus will change all of that. Your faith in him will cause us to view your days as numbered, living your few short days on this earth with your gaze fixed on eternity, holding your plans in this life with an open palm, gladly surrendering to the Lord to change and use you however he wants. But in chapter 5, we see that one's faith in Jesus will not only change how they view their plans, but zooming in the camera a little bit, so to speak, one's faith in Jesus will also affect how you handle your treasures on this earth, your finances, your assets. In the first paragraph of chapter 5, this is where James is heading. And he does so by addressing this topic from the negative angle, by highlighting the coming judgment for those whose hope is only in the material things of this world, whose focus is only on storing up money, storing up material possessions in this life. James starts that in chapter 5, verse 1 by saying, "Come now, you rich." Now, it's important for us to note here that James is not simply speaking to the one who has a lot of money, a lot of material possessions. He's not merely speaking to this group of people, but he's speaking directly to those whose hope is in the material things of this life, those who find their well-being, their satisfaction in the amount in their bank account, no matter how much or how little is in there. James tells this group of people to, as he says in chapter 5, verse 1, to weep and to howl for the miseries that are coming upon you. This language here, it is Old Testament prophetic language. It's language that God used to deliver through his prophets warnings and indictments to those who continued in their rebellion against God. Now we know that usually people associate having more money, being rich, and by having more material possessions with having less problems. We associate having more stuff in this life to having less problems in this life. Oftentimes, people associate money with security. We think that if we just have enough money, we will be fine. We'll have minimal problems and have a comfortable life. But look at what James says. You might have comfort in the here and now, but these miseries that are coming upon those whose ultimate hope is in their possessions of this world is not a maybe, but it is a sure thing. He says, weep and howl for the miseries that are coming upon you. The one who places their hope, their satisfaction, their well-being in the accumulation of wealth will one day have that very, very wealth give evidence against them, and it will eat their flesh like fire, as James says in chapter 5, verse 3. On this final day of judgment, there will be no question, and it will be evident that this person's hope and their love was not ultimately found in Jesus, but it was found in laying up treasures in these short days on earth. And they will face the just, the earned wrath of God that comes from placing their hope, their ultimate satisfaction in anything other than Jesus. God's just wrath will be poured out on them for all of eternity because of their rebellion, because of their placing their ultimate hope, satisfaction, love, not in Jesus, but in the things of this world. Friends, if you're here today and you find your hope, your satisfaction, your well-being, and your riches, your assets, your bank accounts, your retirement accounts, your financial well-being, your financial literacy, literally fill in the blank. If you find your hope in anything that you can accumulate in this life, the reality is that your hope is sorely misplaced. And this will be made sadly evident on the final day of judgment. All of the possessions of this world, all of the money, all of the material things, all of the riches that you could possibly accumulate will one day pass away. James writes in chapter 5, verses 2 and 3, he says that your riches have rotted and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and your silver, they've corroded. The things that so many people put their hope in are decaying. The riches of this world, they are rotting. The gold and the silver, they're corroding. The things of this world that the world says are the surest investments that you could actually make, they are actually rotting and wasting away. Laying up treasures on this earth is not an investment that will give you a worthwhile return. It may feel good in the here and now, but it is not a sure investment considering eternity. A follower of Jesus, doing so must not be true of you. Hear the words of Jesus when he says in Matthew chapter 6, it'll be on the screen. He says, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But rather lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." So friends, this begs the question, where is your treasure? Is your treasure in the things and the riches of this world, or is it in God and God alone? If your hope is in the stuff of the here and now, I would beg you to reckon with the warning that James gives in this passage. If your hope and your satisfaction is found in them and the stuff of this world, they will be evidenced against you and will eat your flesh like fire. If this is where you find yourself, I would beg for you to repent, to turn to Jesus, to run to him and find your ultimate hope, your ultimate satisfaction for this life and for all of eternity in Jesus and Jesus alone. Followers of Jesus, your hope is not in any of the stuff, the money, the riches that you can accumulate in this world. And the way in which you use your finances, the way in which you use the stuff of this world, the treasures of this world, your riches, it is a good indication of where your true allegiance truly lies. Where your treasure is, Jesus says, there your heart will be also. Jesus himself, follower of Jesus, he is your greatest treasure. None of the riches that you can accumulate even compare to him, to knowing and believing in him and knowing that this is true. The only logical response is to leverage our time, our energy, our finances for eternity. Being generous, not stingy with our assets, with our treasures, with the things of this world. Giving to those in need, giving to your local church to see the gospel go forward, using the money that God has given you to be a blessing to others. All of this is understanding that you are really a steward of whatever amount of money that you have. And all of it ultimately belongs to God. James here first points out that those whose ultimate love is money, they are pointlessly accumulating wealth that will not last, and storing up treasures on earth will one day give evidence against them. Now, starting in verse 4, he's going to slightly shift his focus, and he's going to point out that those whose ultimate love is money oftentimes will go to extreme lengths to protect themselves and to protect their money, no matter who that hurts along the way. There was one executive, this is from a movie named, one executive named Frank Shirley, who decided that he was going to cut his employees' monetary Christmas bonus. And instead of giving them a monetary Christmas bonus, he gives them a one-year membership to the Jelly of the Month Club, the gift that keeps on giving. In order to put more money in his pocket, he hurt those who he was actually responsible for caring for as their employee. James says in chapter 5, verse 4, "Behold, the wages of the laborers who mowed your fields, which you kept back by fraud, are crying out against you. And the cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord of hosts." The rich person in this example, he employed some laborers to farm his fields, and apparently this rich person was not acting with integrity. He was not paying his laborers the wages that they actually earned. And out of a desire to make money for himself, the rich person was directly harming those who he was responsible for caring for, and he was shorting them their earned wage. And by doing so, James in verse 6 jumps to the conclusion that the rich person has condemned and murdered the righteous person. By the rich man's dishonest actions, by his dishonest handling of his money, and not paying his people an honest wage, by his action in doing this, he was metaphorically murdering them by depriving them of what they needed to survive. But friends, notice that the injustices that these workers, that these employees, that they were facing at the hands of the rich man, notice that they do not go unnoticed by the Lord. In verse 4, James says, "The cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord of hosts." The Lord knows all injustices, and he will settle all accounts finally and ultimately. The rich man who is dishonest with his wage, who cheats those who are beneath him in order to line his pockets, he is living his life on earth in luxury and in self-indulgence. But the reality is that he's actually fattening himself for a day of slaughter, as James notes in verse 5. Like an animal that is gorging itself, eating right before heading to the slaughterhouse, those whose ultimate love and hope is in the money, the stuff of this world, those who go to great lengths to keep more for themselves, no matter what it does to those around them along the way, they've failed to realize that they are actually gorging themselves on the luxuries of this world and heading straight for final slaughter. Followers of Jesus, these things ought not be so among us. And followers of Jesus, these things won't be so among us. The one who's been saved by Jesus, the one who's been made new, won't live their life placing their hope in the stuff of this world that will one day pass away. They won't be dishonest with their money, their finances, but will live with their eyes fixed on eternity, fixed on Jesus. They will be generous with their resources now. They will live sacrificially in the here and now because they know that the things of this world are ultimately passing away. The one whose life is changed by Jesus will no longer live their life for the things that only matter for the short term, that only matter for the here and now, but they will live their things, they will live their life for the things that will matter 10,000 years from now. And friends, spoiler alert, the things that will matter 10,000 years from now is not your plans or even your finances in the here and now. So then this begs the question, well, what will matter for all of eternity? Our take-home truth today is followers of Jesus will live their lives with eternity in mind. So this begs the question, well, what will matter for all of eternity? Well, friends, once again, thanks be to God that He does not leave us to figure this out on our own, but He tells us clearly and plainly what will happen for all of eternity. Listen to what John writes in Revelation chapter 5. This is a scene that John, this is in his revelation, his vision of what eternity will be like, and this is what he records as to what will happen for all of eternity. Listen to Revelation chapter 5. John writes, "Then I saw in the right hand of him who is seated on the throne a scroll written within and on the back, sealed with 7 seals." This scroll, this is God's plan for salvation. God, what has happened for God to come and to make sinners right with Himself. So he saw the scroll in the right hand, and John, he saw a mighty angel proclaiming with a loud voice, "Who is worthy to open the scroll and break its seals?" And no one in heaven and on earth or under the earth was able to open the scroll and look into it. And I began to weep loudly because no one was found worthy to open the scroll or to look into it. And one of the elders said to me, "Weep no more. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has conquered so that He can open the scroll and its 7 seals." And between the throne and the 4 living creatures and among the elders, I saw a lamb standing as though it had been slain, with seven horns and with 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent out into the earth. And he went and took the scroll from the right hand of him who is seated on the throne. And when he had taken the scroll, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, each holding a harp and golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of the saints. And they sang a new song, saying, "Worthy are you to take the scroll and to open its seals. For you were slain, and by your blood you ransomed people for God from every tribe and language and people and nation. And you have made them a kingdom and priests to our God, and they shall reign on the earth." Friends, this is eternity. Friends, Jesus, He came to live the life that we could never live. And through His life, death, burial, and resurrection, He makes a way for us, for sinners, those who are only deserving of God's wrath, to be restored into relationship with Him. And for all of eternity, our song will be, for those whose faith and trust is in Jesus, our song will be, as John writes in verse 13 of chapter 5, "We will join in with every creature in heaven and on earth and under the earth and in the sea and all that is in them, saying, 'To Him who sits on the throne and to the Lamb be blessings and honor and glory and might forever and ever.'" Friends, this is the picture of eternity. What matters for eternity is not the stuff of this earth, but it is relationship with Jesus. And for those whose faith and trust is in Him, this will be your reality. You will be united with Him for all of eternity, singing praises, "Worthy is the Lamb who was slain." This is what matters for all of eternity. And our reality in the here and now is not living for the stuff of this earth, but it is living with this picture in mind, the picture of Revelation 5, of standing before the throne and singing praises to the Lamb for all of eternity. This is what truly matters in this life. And follower of Jesus, your life will be lived with this picture in mind. Not caring about the stuff of this earth, not caring about your finances, but caring only about singing praises to Him and inviting others to do the same. Because the reality is that this can only be true because of what Jesus has done and faith in Him. So the reality is that this picture changes every way that we go about our life in the here and the now. So followers of Jesus will live their lives with eternity in mind. You will live every aspect, every part of your life in the here and now with this picture in mind. And as we prepare to respond, there are a couple of ways that we respond corporately together. The first is by singing boldly, singing loudly because of who Jesus is and what He has done. We also respond by giving generously and sacrificially to see the mission of God spread here in Lebanon and around the world. There's a box in the back on the hospitality counter where you can give, and there's a QR code on there as well where you can give electronically. The third way we respond is by going. Each week, we send you out of here. We send us out of here to the dying world that we live in, to see people come to know, love, and follow Jesus. We have a mission, and we truly believe that we are being sent out of this place to make Jesus known, to sing the hymn of heaven for all to hear, to invite people to come into this picture of what is coming for eternity for those whose faith and trust is in Jesus. Life with him abundantly and singing praises to him for all of eternity. We respond by going, and finally, we respond by taking the Lord's Supper. Now, this is not for everyone in the room, but this is reserved for followers of Jesus. This is reserved for those who have trusted in Jesus and his finished work on the cross and out of the tomb. And friends, this is a serious time where we remember Jesus' body that was broken and his blood that was poured out for those whose trust is in him. And by taking the bread and taking the juice, we proclaim this truth to one another until he returns. So if you're here today and you're not following Jesus, I would ask you to refrain from taking the Lord's Supper. This is to protect you, but this is also to protect us. But brothers, sisters, even if you are following Jesus, today might not be the day for you to partake in the Lord's Supper. Paul warns us in 1 Corinthians that we ought to come to the table in a worthy manner. So if you are here and you have sin that you're clinging to, sin that you're unwilling to let go of, I would ask you also to refrain from taking the Lord's Supper. Specifically, if you've not followed Jesus in the first step of obedience in baptism, we ask that you would not partake in the Lord's Supper. The elements are on the counter over there by the kitchen, and during this next song will be your opportunity to go to take those. There could be literally 1,000 different ways that the Lord in this moment is prompting you to respond, whether that's sitting in contemplation or sitting in prayer or talking to someone or standing, singing boldly. You respond however the Lord is leading you in this moment.